Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Beer Necessities, where we take a trip down to Bruges. So this trip was part of a 5-day tour of West Flanders that my 12-year-old son Bradders and I took during Easter 2023. So the journey started obviously where our headquarters is here in Colwyn Bay. We took the long drive down south to Folkestone. And then from Folkestone, we took the Eurotunnel across to Calais. And from Calais, it's a fairly short drive, about an hour or so, across to Bruges. And from here, we start our little adventure of brewery visiting and beer tasting. So, as part of this episode, we'll go around 2 different breweries and sample their beers. We'll go to the brewery of the Halve Moon, and then we go to the Timmermans brewery of Bourgogne de Flanders. And from there, episode 2, we will then hop on to the Abbey of St. Sixtus in West Flanders, which is where they make the legendary West Flateren beer. But that's episode 2. So hope you enjoy this particular episode. My first ever episode, so bear with me. I'm going to get more polished at this, I promise, as time goes by and I get used to cameras and people watching while we do this sort of thing. But yeah, please appreciate if you give us a like and follow us so we can, or should I say subscribe, so when more episodes are posted, as they will be in due course, you get notifications and hopefully you get to enjoy them. So yeah, here's episode 1 in Bruges. Enjoy. This is the historic centre of Bruges, capital of West Flanders, Venice of the North, famous for its network of city centre canals, streets lined with chocolatiers, the sweet smell of waffles. But we're not here for waffles, chocolate, or history. We're here for beer. Bruges, a truly majestic medieval Flemish city and one of the best preserved in Europe, and feels like a real step back in time with its delightful Gothic architecture, cobbled streets, city centre canals and modest population of just over 100,000 people. It oozes romance. I've lost count of the number of times I've been to Belgium and Bruges in particular, and it was about time I came here and kick-started that hobby of mine, recording brewery and beer reviews. Bruges was the first stop of a 5-day tour of West Flanders for my 12-year-old son Brad and I over Easter 2023. The local cuisine is outstanding, and sure, you'll get amazing French fries here, and there's actually a museum dedicated to the origin of the Belgian French fry. But in my meat-eating days, I used to absolutely love a Flemish stew, and if you've never tried one, I strongly recommend you do so while here in Bruges. But of course, Belgium is home to many truly outstanding beers that offer so many different surprises. Those distinct Belgian yeasts, blondes, doubles, triples, quads, lambic sits, a beer lover's paradise. So, let's go and take a look at the 2 city centre breweries of Bruges, where you not only have an opportunity to see the brewing process in motion, but you can also relax and enjoy a beer or 10. So here I am outside Brewery de Halve Maan, which means the brewery of the Halve Moon. This brewery, right over here, has been in the centre of Bruges for 500 years, but owned by the current family just for 150. And it makes certainly one of my favourite beers, Brugse Zot. But it makes Straffe Hendrik as well, which is a 9%. Now, what's unique about this brewery is not just the beer that it makes and how long it's been in the centre of the town. It's the fact that these are very tight cobbled streets, and the beer is still brewed here in this very, very compact area. Now, a few years ago, the brewery decided to build a pipe under the streets of Bruges. Now, from running from here, and I'll show a little picture of the pipe in a second, it runs about 2 miles out of the town, all the way under the streets into a bottling facility where it's put into bottles and distributed pretty much around the world. So whilst this is a very traditional and excellent beer,
It's pretty commercial these days as well. You can get it in the UK, so not too hard to get hold of, but a darn sight cheaper when you're over here. So here I am inside the brewery de Halve Maan. It's got a really good bar and restaurant here. I must have been here 10, 15 times over the years. Keep coming back. Must be something good about it, not just the beer, just the general feel of the place. And the food's good here as well. You can have a tour of the brewery here. Done it before, not for many years. So, we're gonna have a little look around later on today. But you can obviously see that the beer making process is there for all to see here, right behind me. We might see the odd tourist having a guided tour here, but it's all made here on site, and that's what's really impressive about it. I'm pretty excited because although it's not been that long ago since I had Brugse Zot, it's been a while since I had it here. Not since COVID, at least, anyway.
Brugse Zot means the Fools of Bruges, hence the jester on the bottle and glasses, and was a nickname given to the people of Bruges back in the Middle Ages, according to legend. Maximilian of Austria inherited Bruges and visited there back in the 1400s, and the people revolted. And after a lot of conflict, the people eventually decided to try and build bridges with Maximilian. When they, at one point, asked for permission to build a psychiatric hospital, Maximilian responded by saying they should close the gates to the city because the place was already filled with fools. A standard tour of the brewery is around €16, lasts around 45 minutes and includes a voucher to exchange for a tasty beer at the end. There are upgraded versions of the tour available, which include more in-depth tasting sessions, though I personally have never done one of those.
Right, so first one in. Always like to have a few just to sort of get the palate going and whatnot. But you can see, actually, first of all, you get a really, really cool glass with Zot. And the jester I've already explained in terms of why the people of Bruges are known as the Bruges Fools. But on the glass, you get a little diagram of, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but the beer pipeline that runs under the city to the bottling plant. So you can see it all here. The first thing you'll notice is that it's a golden, kind of hazy drink. So it's not completely clear, but it comes with a really rich, frothy head. That might have been of little interest to anybody, but for good measure. Now, I have a really bad sense of smell, but straight away, the thing that stands out when you take a whiff of Brugse Zot is that classic Belgian yeast. The classic Belgian yeast is what really gives pretty much most Belgian beers that distinct taste. You don't have to be a beer connoisseur to taste a beer and go, that's Belgian. And it's not the strength. Although the yeast obviously plays a massive part in that, it's not the strength of the beer that determines that taste. It's the yeast. Belgian brewing yeast, and there's all different types, is very, very distinctive. It's very, very sweet. And that really adds to the aroma and the taste of drinks like Brugse Zot. So, yeah, it's sweet. And it's not a word I like using, but you get that sort of floral element to it as well. And that's because there are two different types of hops in this. You get the Hallertauer Mittelfried and you get the Styrian Golding, both originating from Bavaria, Austria, around that area. So those are the types of hops that you'll see in classic German and Bavarian drinks. And they really add to the flavour, but they give the slight bitterness. The two aroma hops, so they give a really good smell, but they really add to the bitterness of the taste. So you get the sweetness from the yeast, the Belgian yeast, and the malts, the selection of malts that are used in here, and then it just gets countered by the bitterness of the hops to make what I believe is a truly fantastic drink. There you go, straight away. You get the initial bitterness of the hops, and then the sweetness of that Belgian yeast and the malts really sort of kicks in. Gets a really good balance. There are some where it's just personal preference, but sometimes something that's really overpowered with the hops is bitter from start to finish. Sometimes they can be really heavy on the malt, and you get a bit too much sweetness. But this, I think the combination of the yeast, the malt, and those two hops kind of balances itself out really, really well. So bitterness followed by sweetness. Now, without wanting to be too pretentious about this sort of thing, it's quite often said that you get a sort of a spicy, fruity taste from this. I'd agree. I remember the first time I tasted it, that first initial aftertaste I felt was like paprika. And I still feel like that today. And you do get a citrus taste to it. Not overpowering. And when we say fruity, we don't mean like these Belgian beers where they taste of cherries or strawberries. It is absolutely, a subtle taste that you get in terms of oranges, lemons, limes, maybe. Really subtle. But that little bit of pepperiness that really makes this a very special beer. Now, it is certainly not a session beer. You wouldn't want to be drinking this all day because it comes in at 6%. Although I've had a good go in the past. I think it's a lovely beer to drink on a warm summer's day outside. Really refreshing. But it also pairs well with food. The brewery's website say goes well with creamy dishes. I mean, each to their own. I'm not sure I would have a beer with a creamy dish, but certainly with fish or meat, I think it goes really, really well. But yeah, on a summer's day, 3 or 4 of them outside, nothing better.
Well, Straffe Hendrik always comes with a good head. This has diminished over the past minute while I've been sorting out some cheese. Anyhow, Straffe Hendrik is an excellent beer. 9%, and it's classified as a blonde. However, that is real amber. Real amber, that is. I think, before I even describe it, it absolutely goes well with cheese, bread, pretty much anything. This is a very, very outstanding beer, Straffe Hendrik, which means strong Henry. It's named after the people who've owned the brewery for the past circa 150 years. Most of them have been called Henry down the years, and therefore Strong Henry is what was coined for it. But this is it's lively. It's not overly carbonated, but it's lively on the tongue. It gets described as being a light beer with a hint of caramel and cooked bananas, and I get it because if I put it into layman's terms, right, first thing is there's an initial bitterness, then it breaks out into what is almost like a very subtle Werther's original. It's like a sweet toffee, extremely pleasant, whilst also being extremely strong. It's an absolute pleasure to drink. It's slightly more on the bitter side than the sweet, slightly, and that works because it gives you the best of both worlds. I honestly believe this is one of the best beers in the world. It's a solid 8 or 9. Now, when people say caramel, bananas, I think you just have to almost sit back and have a couple of them and just think about it, and you'll get it. It's sweet and sour, but powerful. At 9%, it's extremely powerful, but it goes down really easily. Would you know you're drinking a 9% beer? I'm not so sure. It's got that typical yeast effect to it, in terms of the smell and the taste, but it hasn't got that overpowering effect where you think you're drinking something that is potentially quite lethal, and it is potentially very lethal, but it's also very, very delicious. I mean, 3 or 4 of these and you'd be having an early night, and that's a great beer.
It really is. So anyway, we're gonna carry on drinking Straffe Hendrik with some cheese and some bread, and probably go and pass out outside the brewery. Cheers. So in Bruges, you don't just have to go to breweries to enjoy a good beer. There are lots of bars and restaurants with really extensive menus of all kinds of different craft and international beers. Just behind me here is the Historian, but you'll see a balcony just up there. That's the Duvelorium. It's on the main square, Market Square here in Bruges. It's actually a really great place to go and sit and enjoy a beer. Just sat on that balcony overlooking the whole Market Square and watching the world go by. As the name might suggest, Duvelorium. It's the Duvel beer that's prominent in there, but they do sell other beers as well. It's really nice up there. Lots of souvenirs to buy, but well worth a visit if you come to Bruges. Now, just down the side street here is Cambrinus as well. That's a place I've been to a few times in the past, and they have a menu of, if I remember rightly, hundreds of beers to try from. You couldn't do it all. You could never do it all, but it'd be nice to have a try. We'll pop there a little bit later, and hopefully find a couple of other good bars to recommend if you come here and want to enjoy a range of different sort of beers. This is Bourgogne de Flanders. Bourgogne de Flanders has been produced since 1911. Now, originally it was produced by Den-Os Brewery, which means the Ox Brewery. However, Den-Os Brewery went bust in, I think it was 1957. Tough times post-war. Lots of other beers emerging, particularly from Germany. Hard times fell on the brewery. However, the brewery owner made sure that the recipe continued to exist and moved it from different breweries to make sure it was still produced. In the 90s, the Timmermans Brewery, and if you know your Belgian beers, you've probably come across Timmermans a number of times, they took it on and started producing it, and then moved the production of it to here in the centre of Bruges again about 10 years ago. Now, Bourgogne de Flanders, I've never tasted it, so I'm looking forward to it. It's a lambic beer, which means part of it is made using wild yeast and wheat, basically. So the wild yeast is very different to the brewer's yeasts that you use in other beers, particularly in Belgian beers, and it can give it a sweet and sour taste, but until I try it, it's very difficult to know. The lambic is held in wooden barrels for sometimes months, sometimes even years, and I think that's what gives it a very distinct kind of flavour, and I'm sure it's an acquired taste, but as soon as those doors open, we're going to go in and give it a sample. Well, the doors are open, let's go do it. In the courtyard of Bourgogne de Flanders, and here is Bourgogne de Flanders. Now, Bourgogne de Flanders means Burgundy Flanders, or Flanders Burgundy. So there's no surprise as to why it's called that, because it is a very deep, dark colour with a tinge of red in there, so no surprise. Comes with a lovely thick head on it as well. Looks really luxurious, actually. Wow, okay. I mean, personally, I'm not getting a great deal of the, well, I suppose the more traditional Belgian yeast, but I guess this is a lambic, so it hasn't got traditional Belgian yeast in it. You know, as I explained earlier, lambic is made from naturally occurring wild yeasts from, I think, around the Brussels area, actually, but they're definitely Belgian. And it'll give it a very unique smell and taste, but that's very malty. I get a real sort of sweetness and malt from that. really interesting. Well, the proof is always in the eating of the pudding, so let's give this a taste. My word. So that's, I mean, that's interesting. It's quite ale-like. Again, a bit like with the smell, you get a real immediate rush of the malts. But I think because of the type of yeasts that are involved, and I think there's, I'm no expert on lambic, but it's, and I've seen it described as this actually in various places, sweet and sour, and I think that's the best way to describe this. Not particularly carbonated, but the sweetness is quickly followed by the sourness, presumably of the lambic and the hops that are involved. It's actually tasty. There's not a lot of depth to it. It is only 5%, which is quite unusual for a Belgian beer, but that'll all be to do with the way that this is prepared. So there are flavours there without a shadow of a doubt, but it's not got a lot of body in it. So I think, a couple of these would be absolutely fine. It's nice. It's not amazing, but it's drinkable. It's very drinkable, and probably like most Belgian beers, it won't get you absolutely smashed out of your skull. So no, it's I think it's fine to drink on its own. Probably would go well with some sort of foods as well. But again, really subjective stuff. I would imagine you'd be talking about meats, pastas, fish, that sort of thing, really, depending on what tickles your fancy. Yeah, there we go. So probably, if I've got time, I will try their other beers as well. So they've got a blonde and a brown as well, which are stronger by a few percent. Be interesting to see. But Bourgogne de Flanders, yeah, I'd give it maybe a 6.5 out of 10. But again, it's all subjective stuff. It does have some really good flavours, but I like a little bit more, a little bit more body to my beer. But it is nice to stray away from the traditional Belgian yeasts and the sweetness that comes with those to something that is extremely different. Yeah. So, cheers. Okay, Blonden, which means the blonde ox. Now, this did come a couple of minutes ago, of which it had a very thick, fluffy head on it. However, I had a camera issue and lost a moment. And if I keep buying another fresh drink every time I need to do another cut, my son here is going to have to carry me back to the hotel fairly early doors. So imagine the head up was up, about up to there. And what we've got again is a Belgian blonde, which is quite hazy in colour. The sense from it, not particularly strong, delicate, maybe some of the malts, the sweetness from the malts. Smells very lagery actually, but yeah, it doesn't give a lot away. And then let's see how this chap holds up to the palate. A little bit of carbonation in there, and then again, what we're getting is a real balance between the hops, and I'm not sure exactly what hops they're using here, but I would imagine they're fairly standard ones. And then there's the bitterness from those hops, but the sweetness from the malts and the yeast in there as well. So I think it goes quickly from sweet to bitter, and it's quite dry as well. I mean, it's okay. It's not going to set the world alight, this beer, but it's a decent effort. And actually, what's quite interesting is I'm sat in the courtyard. I mean, inside here is quite a nice place to come and visit. I'll do a shoot in there afterwards where we'll just walk through, and it's actually on the canal as well, the front of this. So it's quite a nice place to come and just relax and have a couple of drinks. But when you're sat in the courtyard, I will use my mobile phone now, and you'll see that actually, Bradley, say hello. Hola. We are right next to where the beer is made. Quite cool. All in there. There we go. Bradley here obviously is my sidekick on this tour. He's here to make sure that bags get carried, and then later on in the afternoon, after a bit of beer tasting, that I get carried as well. And at 6.5%, if you were to have a few of these, you quite possibly need some assistance back to your hotel. But yeah, that's decent. It's quite the carbonation and the malts make it quite a refreshing drink, but there is a real bitterness to it as well. So yeah, it ticks a few different boxes depending on what your preference is. So would I recommend it? Yeah, it's another 6.5 out of 10. Worth having, one or two. Yeah. Bourgogne de Flanders, Blonden, Brondox. Cheers.
Bourgogne de Flanders is very easy to find because it's just a very short walk from the main market square. Inside, it's a really nice pub to relax for a drink and a bite to eat, but the most appealing part of this venue is the lovely canal side terrace it has. Great place to watch the world go by in these beautiful surrounds. And there's also a shop there selling beers, glasses, and other types of merchandise. That brings us to the end of this particular episode. Make sure you give us a like and follow us so you get notifications on all future episodes.